But it falls upon me today to welcome Lucy to come and give us our first talk. I met Lucy for the first time about 13 or 14 years ago maybe, and I've done a few experiments based around some things I learned from her, and she is an absolutely wonderfully interesting person, so I hope you enjoy the next hour and a quarter.
There we are. I think yes, I am switched on. That's good. But it's lovely to be back again, I can't tell you. I think I last gave a talk here in Cirencester, which was a lovely place. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, so it's great to be back. And thank you for inviting me. The crop circles are an evolving phenomenon. And, where are we? Gone already. There we are. Very good. Now, crop circles aren't the only things that have been appearing in the fields this year. We've had wonderful hidden treasures appearing, and some of them, quite remarkably, resemble crop circles. This one was at Scorton in Derbyshire, and another one which resembles a whole lot of crop circles were prehistoric ceremonial landscape in English, in Oxfordshire. And this was remains of a Roman castle, encased in Norfolk. And we have a prehistoric or Roman farm, Newport, South Wales, and then a modern one, which I have included because it's an airfield very close to me, at Lasham. And this is why many people love flying with me, because not only do we go and see crop circles, but we very often see Silbury Hill, Avebury, Stone Complex, Stonehenge, and when we've had a really scorchingly hot summer like this, these wonderful old ancient archaeological remains appear in the fields. So it's an archaeological quest as well as a crop circle sightseeing tour. So it's all very exciting. I'm going to start with this particular story, and many of you may have heard of it before, but it is of such fundamental importance that I think is worth telling all over again. It actually confirmed many of the hypotheses that people were working on at the time. And I've been giving a talk at college in Hampshire, and after the talk, somebody took a taxi and just happened to say to the taxi driver, I've just been to a wonderful talk on crop circles. And the taxi driver said, oh, I saw one appear at Stonehenge. Well, I was perfectly certain one hadn't appeared at Stonehenge that year. So I made loads of inquiries. No, they hadn't. No crop circle that year. So I managed to get the taxi driver's telephone number. And I said, please tell me where this crop circle is. And she said, oh no, it wasn't this year at all. It was many years ago. So at that particular time there had been three, one in 1996, one in 1997, and one in 2002. It was 1996, she said, I remember vividly, because her son was in the army, he was on leave, and in the West Country. And she said, moreover, she said, I remember it was a Sunday, because travelling on the A303, masses of traffic was coming back from the West Country, and the road was almost blocked, and she was just sailing through. And as she came down the hill from the Amesbury roundabout, you come down and you see Stonehenge on the right, and it's extraordinary how small it looks. And it looks even smaller from the air. I mean, you really have to hunt it out from the air. And yet when you're there, these great big megaliths are monumental. And anyhow, she was coming down the hill, she saw an extraordinary isolated cloud above the field on the opposite side of the Stonehenge. So she thought, well, that's strange, that's unusual. She got closer, and the closer she got, she saw a whole lot of cars pulled into the verge opposite Stonehenge, the other side of the road. A car came out, so she leapt in. She thought, I wonder what everybody's looking at in the field. So she joined them, went up to the fence, and there in front of her eyes was the field, the wheat in the field just going down in front of her eyes. Now, that was the most miraculous thing. I mean, just imagine if you were standing there and you saw the whole field, well, not the whole field, but part of the field just going down in front of your eyes. She said she couldn't see the shape because she was on the same level, on the same plane. But she said, I said, well, what about the cloud? Was it actually physically connected to the ground? And she said, no, it wasn't. They were quite separate. But there seemed to be some interaction or some intercommunication between the two. Because she said, as whatever was happening in the field was expanding, she said, so the cloud was rotating and also expanding. So one was going one way, but they were both seemed to be a communication between the two. So I said to her, well, this is absolutely extraordinary. Can you tell me how long this took? And she was Irish and she was very blunt. She said, Lucy, when you're watching something like that, you're not looking at your watch as well. And I said, no, of course you're not. So I pressed her a bit more, because in my first book, I'd written, this was in 1990, I'd written up an awful lot about eyewitness reports, and they all happened within a matter of seconds. And so I pressed her, and she said, oh, I don't know. She said, I really honestly don't know. She said, maybe 20, 25 minutes, I really don't know. So again, I thought, oh dear, this is all wrong. So I said, listen, can you think again a little bit more? And she said, Lucy, she said, I was there, I know what I saw. You weren't there, and you don't know what I saw. No argument to that. So I went home feeling really quite disappointed. And on the way home, I suddenly thought, well, hold on a minute. That was a big circle. And there were many, many circles, little circles to it. I'll just move on a little bit. There we are. So I got in touch with my guru, Jim Lance, the moment I got home, and I said, listen, Jim, I want to tell you about this. Well, Jim was wildly excited about the cloud, because he said what he'd said was always a part of the forming process. And I said, now listen, about the size and number of circles, might it be possible, just because there were so many, that it might take longer to form? And Jim said, yes, of course. Just send me the size and number of the circles. And in those days, things have changed very much nowadays. It's a completely different scenario in the crop circle fields. The farmers are unhappy, they harvest them out almost as soon as they realize they've got any, and so it's almost impossible to do any research. And people aren't doing any research. I think my research is the only one that's actually going on in England at the moment. So Jim wrote back saying, it's generally accepted that as a result of work conducted in the 1990s, it's possible to calculate the time a formation takes to appear based on the size and number of circles. The method relates to the Earth's gravitational and magnetic fields. This predicts a velocity of the resulting vortex filament of some 10 foot per second. Now, this is actually quite a critical calculation. The filament propagates not unlike a solar flare, repeatedly looping through the Earth's surface. To create the 151 circles in the 915.5 times 508 foot pattern would take of the order of 20 to 25 minutes to create. There you go, she was right. The descending force emits an electrical discharge, releases bubbles from the underground aquifer, which rises up through the surface of the ground and patterns are formed. There is less pressure outside than inside, therefore there is a sort of sucking down motion from inside which bends or sucks down the crop at the base. And these patterns evolve like embroidery, half above the ground and half under the ground. Now, who was it yesterday who was talking about this coming up from under the ground? Somebody last night, I remember. You were. Well done. I said you got half of it, right? The mist would appear as the result of cool water vapour rising from the aquifer beneath and behaves in a manner similar to what happens in the lab when electrical discharges are created through water and different patterns emerge on the surface. Mist forms a little distance from the triggering point, which would support what occurred in this case. M could see the circle growing. As for the height of the mist, it would be no higher than the radius of the formation created, and the mist cloud would grow as the formation grew. Brilliant, all brilliant stuff, and hugely helpful in giving us a fundamental progress report on what were hypotheses at the time. But whereas I'm not a scientist and I don't have any letters after my name, I know that science is absolutely intrinsic and basic and essential, but to me there is an intelligence behind this phenomenon. So I said to Jim, I said that to Jim, and he wrote back saying, however, the more complex patterns of additional information contained in the sphere, and who or what presses the button to make these, is not within our present knowledge or understanding. So there we are. That was a hugely important formation. And the farmer was thrilled to bits. The whole world seemed to come, and he really killed it. He started off by charging £1 to get in. He went to 5, and I think it ended up at 10. I must tell you, what I always say to people is, if you don't feel well, for goodness sakes, come out. And some people can't even stand looking at these. They're very, very sensitive. They can't stand looking at these because these circles, just like Pythagoras was telling us, number and music are related, and a lot of these are geometric. Well, most of them are geometric in some form or another, and they're giving off frequencies. And I'll tell you more about that later. But as I was walking up the tram lines to this one, I suddenly had a gut feeling, don't go in. And I was with a couple of friends, and quite often I've ignored this and I've paid the penalty. And I've gone in and I've either come up with a cracking headache or felt really, really nauseous. Well, I did go back reluctantly. I was dying to go in. And these two friends did go in, and they came out pea green. And it wasn't until we were outside the radius of that circle, and I can't tell you how big the radius of it was. It was absolutely huge, wasn't it, Jim? It was one of the greatest areas of energy that we'd ever had. Quite colossal. So that was a really fun. I'm going to just tell you one. I think there have been one or two really fantastic circles over the years, and I'm going to show you 3 or 4 of them. This one was in 1990. It was underneath Barbary Castle, the old Iron Age hill fort in Wiltshire, which is an area of huge electric energy. And it was John Michel, who many of you may know, well, he's dead now, more's a pity, but he was a classical scholar. And he was also slightly wacky, which was really lovely. I was very fond of him. Anyhow, he wrote a huge amount about this. And one of the points is that the area, oh, wait a second, the square footage of those 3 circles fits exactly into the centre circle. And the square footage of all of them comes to 31,680 square feet. Now, this is a very important number in many, many ways, but 3168 is also the emblematic number that our ancient Christian scholars gave to Jesus Christ. So it also has a sacred interpretation to it. And in fact, John Michel wrote that this Barbary Castle tetrahedron is nothing short of a divine revelation. This one was pi in 2000 and, when was it? In 2008, again underneath Barbary Castle. Now, it was Mike Reed, who unfortunately is no longer with us, but he was a retired astrophysicist working on the MMT telescope, the multi-million telescope, with the Harvard-Smithsonian Observatory. And it was he who reckoned that this was pi to the power of 9. And he told Linda Moulton Howe about it, and Linda sent me a picture. It was just a sort of pencil diagram. And what he did was he took the little circle there as being the decimal point, and working from these jaggedy bits, he went really from that point there, and he worked all the way around. And as you can see here, I haven't got the point, I'm going to point here, we go. 3.141. Wait a second, where are we? Oh, wait a second, I think I've gone wrong. Here we are. Can't see that number. Anyhow, you can see it. And 9, 2, 6, and then I'm going all the way around. So, in fact, what we have is, and let me just read it, we've got 1.1, 592,654. So that's pi to the power of 9. But what's interesting is that those little circles, wait a second, those little circles at the top are actually not circles, and they're not ellipses either. They are ellipses. And ellipsis in geometric terms is and so on. So that was another absolutely mind-blowing one. That was so precise. This was one known as the jaw dropper. And this one appeared in 2001, and it had 409 circles. What was absolutely extraordinary about it was that it was raining the night it appeared. Now, if you walk down the tram lines, and those are those lines there, which are there to facilitate the farmers spraying and sowing, you're bound to get mud on your feet. And the mud can actually build up on the soles of your shoes, so that you have to literally shake it off. So if it were raining and you were then going to walk in the crop, you're bound to get the crop smeared in mud. And the first person to go in the next morning, there was not a trace of mud on that, and yet it had been raining that night. Also, that was deeply rutted ground. Now, how could you get a formation with the circles of that complete precision, again it was a fractal image, if the ground was deeply rutted? Many, many strange things happened in there. There were actually, I said, 409 circles, and the circle, people who make circles, actually were very honest. They wrote to several of us saying, here's something to ponder. If this formation were man-made, allowing for the time to get into and out of the field under cover of darkness, the construction left should be about 4 hours. Given that there were over 400 circles, some of which span approximately 90 foot in diameter, that would mean that one of those circles would need to be created every 30 seconds. And that's not even allowing for the time for surveying, purely flattening. This formation pushes the envelope, and that's a massive understatement. My brain hurts. So there we are. Now, I'm going to tell you a story of what happens when you go into a crop circle and you don't take your dowsing rods with you or your pendulum. Many a time, as you walk up to a circle which is either on the level ground or slightly on a slope, you can see it from a distance, but the closer you get to it, it literally disappears. So you go into a field and you haven't even been able to even count the tram lines along because, again, they seem to all merge in. So what I normally do is I walk down to the bottom of the field with my pendulum or my rods, and I ask them to indicate which tram line I should go down. Sometimes I've had to walk yards and yards and yards, but never once has it let me down. But this time, unfortunately, I was stupid enough and I left it behind. A lovely family called Alkia from America had written to me in February and said they'd love if I take them on a private tour around the circles and anything else I could suggest. So I said, right, what we'll do, we'll visit the circles in the morning and then possibly sacred sites. Then in the afternoon, we're going to take a helicopter ride, and then in the evening, we had private entry tickets to Stonehenge. So it was a fantastic schedule I'd arranged. However, the morning came, it was pouring with rain. We'd arranged to meet at Silver Hill Park, and they were there, smiling like mad. Mark, who was a cardiologist, his wife Karen, who was perinatologist, 2 children, Gabriel of 16 and little Anna of 12. Now little Anna was actually adopted, and she came from Russia. And the Alkias told me a story, and I have to believe it's true, that it's very dicey to adopt a child in America, because the parents can at some point the blood parents can ask to have their child back again. And imagine the trauma that would cause. Also, that there's an awful lot of drugs in America, so you wouldn't know if there's any drug history behind the child. So they decided to go to Russia, so they had to fill in masses and masses and masses of paperwork. Eventually their time came. They had stipulated that they'd like a girl, and Karen had said she'd like a dark-haired girl, but that was as far as they could go. And so when the day came and they were taken to the orphanage or the child's home, wherever it was, they weren't allowed to choose. They were taken straight to a bed, a cot. And Anna thought, well, when she had this child, she was going to call her. And Karen said that when she had this child, she was going to call her Anna. They got to this cot, and at the bottom of the bed, it's read Anna. She knew she'd got the right child. She was a lovely child. She was quite small for her age. But when we met at the car park, I said, now listen, what would you like to do? Because if we go into a crop circle, we're going to get absolutely soaked to the skin, because as you walk down between the tram lines, as the crop grows up, there's very little room, and the crop, you're brushing against the crop, and all the water that's held in the seed head and the stalks and the leaves and everything comes onto you, and you get soaking like I can't tell you. Oh, I said, we can go and see some sacred sites. We can go and see Avery or West Kennedy Long Barrow or all sorts of things. And Gabriel said, no, let's go into a crop circle. So I'd already been into this one, and I thought I knew which tram line to go down. Anyhow, as I said, I didn't have my pension or rods. So we went down, and I thought I knew which tram line went to go down, but when we got to that particular one, there was a lot of wind damage, and it was going to be really difficult to enter. So I said, well, let's go down a little bit further. So we went down, we walked down the tram line, no circle. So we were getting wet. So then we went down the next tram line, no circle. I was feeling quite embarrassed by this time, and poor little Anne was shivering like mad, and she being small, the water was actually going down the back of her neck. And she said, oh, I'm so cold, I'm so cold. So I said, well, listen, are we going to capitulate? No, they said. So we found the original tram line, where there was the wind damage, we went down there, and yes, we got into the circle. But we were all frozen. And when we got out of it and trudged back to the car, the Alkea's car, I said, Anna, how are you, darling? Oh, she said, I'm fine. I can't feel anything now. When I thought, well, this is worrying. So I said, listen, I booked up a table at the bar, that's where we'll go. And Mark said, no, Mark the cardiologist said, no, we're all going to die of pneumonia. Let's go back to the hotel in Salisbury. So we went back to the car park to collect my car, and I was going to follow them. Well, when I got to the car park, I thought, well, I need to take my boots off. And as I took my one first, I thought, well, my feet are awfully heavy. It felt as though I had a ton weight in them. When I took my first boot off, they all burst into laughter. And so they said, hold on, next time you take your boot off, there it is. That's the wonderful circle. It was beautiful. Underneath the white horse. And when I took my second boot off, I knew why. Literally gallons of water poured out of it. And this is what happened. So if you can imagine how much water had gone into my boot, it was the same amount of water had gone into our clothes. I mean, we were soaking, absolutely soaking. So off we went to Salisbury. But that taught me a lesson. Take your dicing rods or your pendulum. So we went to Salisbury. It was still raining, so the helicopter flight had to be cancelled. We went to Sarah, it was still raining. We got home, we changed our clothes. I borrowed some of Cam's. We were wet again, you see. So I said, oh, come on, let's go to Stonehenge, where at least we could be dry, and we could go into the excellent exhibition. So we went there, Stonehenge. We had our private entry. It was still raining. But never have I met a more charming or enthusiastic and wonderful family, and I'm still in touch with them. But that was a hard-learned lesson. And the next day it was sunny, so we flew. Now this, I'm going to tell you one or two little stories. Jim and I are writing a book. It's going to be out next June. So, I'll put in advance orders. It's in America. So, it'll come over here. But I give an annual talk every year in Petersfield. And I gave it, this is the place I do it, and it's actually a very big hall. That's the door you come in, you go across, kitchen's in there. It's a huge hall. Anyhow, a friend of mine called Paddy Lance, who over the years has had increasingly bad rheumatism. She used to go into service, she used to fly, etc., etc., until she's now completely disabled. And she was absolutely dying to come down to hear this talk. And they live in London, so her daughter brought her down. I found a lovely hotel who had a room for the disabled, and I put her at the top of the hall, so right next, she could see what was going on. And afterwards, when all the chairs were cleared away and the hall was empty, lots of people came up to chat to me afterwards. And then I suddenly saw Paddy, but no wheelchair. So I said, Paddy, where's your wheelchair? And the daughter was dancing around her in a frenzy, thinking her mother was going to fall over. And Paddy said, oh, I'm fine. So I was so taken aback, I didn't really know what to say. Here was this total invalid, disabled invalid, and standing up. So I said, well, what about the pain? And she said, oh, that's 99% gone. I couldn't believe it. And then she just walked away. We chatted for a bit. She walked away, striding completely evenly, upright, as though there was absolutely nothing wrong with her in the world. This sort of thing can happen. But anyhow, I have to tell you, the next day, the pain was back. But she wrote to tell me that there was a feeling of well-being that continued for many, many weeks afterwards. Now, this particular publisher asked me to write a book on healing stories. And I had to say, well, yes, we'll do that, but there'll be the other side of the coin. Because you don't always feel well by any manner of means. And Jim and I, over the years, have worked on being so factual and so honest in all our research. Our reputations of 30 years would have gone literally in 24 hours, and we weren't prepared for that. This had happened many times. The jaw dropper one, somebody called Leslie Clemenson, she had terrible arthritis. Her legs were so swollen she could hardly get into the boxer, and she persevered and she struggled into it. And when she came out, her shoes were falling off. The swelling had gone down to such a degree, and so we don't know what's happening, but we do know something extraordinary is happening, and all we can say in this particular case, the inflammation is being reduced. But why? We don't know. This is all part of our continued investigation. Now, this is the other side of the coin. This one happened on the 7th of June, no, 7th of July 2007. So it's 07, 07, 07. And we did our research. Jim, you were there. We did our research in that one. And Hazel Drummond was with me. Hazel Drummond she's an expert on the Asara technique, which measures your whole body energies and systems baseline. It's an extraordinary. Professor William Tillard from Stanford University, he said it was the best diagnostic technique available. Anyhow, we all went in, and Hazel started literally jumping around, skipping around like a child. I felt brilliant. In fact, we all felt brilliant. And the results were fascinating. Win Keach and Gary King were stationed on the hillside the night that formed, and Win Keach is an expert with infrared photography. And he made a video, and it appeared that something was happening in the fields that night, which appears on his video. So we did our research in there, and that night I suffered the most appalling pains in my leg, as I'm a crampy person. In fact, I had a lot of cramp last night. But that was no cramp at all, I can tell you. It was absolutely excruciating. I managed to get out of bed. I clung onto one of the posts of my four-poster bed, and I thought, how long can I endure this? This pain is so absolutely terrible. I just didn't know how long I could last. And then it went, and I thought my legs were going to be bruised all over the next morning. Not a sign. And Mary Bennett, who'd gone in the day it actually formed, she was literally writhing on the ground that night. She had such pains in her legs. She said again, she had never experienced anything pain of that degree. Hazel Drummond, who was doing the Asara technique, she felt so ill that week she had to cancel all her appointments. So that was definitely the other side of the coin. And I don't think for a single person, I don't know how you felt, Jim, but just about everybody felt pretty ghastly after being in that one. And yet we felt so well when we were actually inside it. It was an extraordinary one. So the next time I went to see my doctor, I told her about this, and I said, can you tell me why on earth this could happen? What can you explain? And all she could say to me was, you seem to work with radiation, don't you? And just to tell you a little bit more about that, there was a Canadian who had been in the Julia set, which I showed you originally. I told you a story about it originally. And they came to stay with me, he and various others came to stay with me the night he'd been in. And he said he felt completely irradiated in that particular, in the Julia set formation. And he said, I know what I'm talking about, he said, because I actually work with radiation. So that was what my doctor said. And I said, yes, but can you explain the pain? And she said, a pain like that can only be a nerve pain. And she suggested it was down to the perineal nerve, which runs up your legs, and it runs all the way up really from the base all the way up. Well, I'll tell you, thank goodness that's never happened again. But strange things do happen in the field, and that's why I said if you don't feel well, for goodness sakes, come out. Because they affect people in a different way. And my research really started as a result of a friend of mine who is still with us, thank goodness. She's had Parkinson's. But in 1996, she was dying to go into a circle. And I was very, very reluctant to let her go in. Again, because you don't feel well. Anyhow, eventually this one turned up in 1997, which was as close to being beneficial as any circle I had been in up to that point. So I suggested she went in, and she and a friend sat in the centre, and her shaking stopped for 24 hours. Now when you've got Parkinson's, you're shaking so many times per second, and to stop shaking for an hour, 2 hours, but for 24 was really something quite unheard of. So this really was the basis of continuing with my research. Because you know you can work on something year after year, you're getting the same results, and you just feel you aren't making any progress at all. So when this happened, I thought, well, you know, this is a sort of catalyst for keeping going. And so it wasn't until we went into this one at Vernon Dean that is very close to Chute, which is on the borders of Wiltshire, Hampshire, that our technology and our methodology had improved, and Hazel's siren technique, the program, could now measure up into the gamma level of brain activity. And we found that people were spiking in this particular level. It's a very high frequency, it's between approximately 32 to 74 hertz per second. And so suddenly, this was a completely new measurement, and I hadn't really, well, I didn't know much about gamma, so I read a tremendous amount on on Google, and what I found was one tiny little, almost hidden paragraph in an article saying that in the gamma level of brain activity, the brain naturally produces dopamine. Well, that was a wonderful sort of moment of huge triumph, if you like, because I suddenly knew we were on the right track, and that Mary Davis must have had this huge burst of gamma when she went into the original one. So I was giving another talk, again, somewhere in Hampshire, and there were quite a lot of Parkinson's sufferers there, and they put me in touch with a scientist, a neurologist, and I think he actually was in Leicestershire. Well, again, as I don't have any letters after my name, it was a huge amount of courage to actually pick up the telephone and speak to him, because crop circles have such a bad press, due to the press, that most people, certainly scientists, you know, would just plonk the telephone down. Anyhow, after 2 weeks, I suddenly felt one morning, I felt quite brave. So before that sort of moment of bravery disappeared, I picked up the telephone and I actually got straight through to him. And I thought, well, I'll bang on about this right away. And he stopped me in the middle and he said, Lucy, this is really, really fascinating, because this is the same line of research that I'm following. And he said when he raised his patients into the gamma level of brain activity, it inhibited their dyskinesia, i.e. it stopped their shaking. So again, I knew we were on the right track, and this was a moment of triumph, I can't tell you. A huge step forward. So Parkinson's sufferers have been with me from that well before then, and also essential tremor sufferers. Essential tremor can be linked to Parkinson's, or indeed it cannot. It can be quite separate. Now, Paul Gehry, who is, you probably all know Paul Gehry, he's an advanced clinical physiologist from the Devon Exeter Hospital. He's joined our team. Here he is measuring Jill Patik, who has been with me for years. She's a Parkinson's sufferer. got electrodes on her head. And he's using the mind mirror. The mind mirror is a highly advanced piece of technology. In the old days, this Will Maxwell Cage used to come along. And of course it was Maxwell Cage who developed the original mind mirror. It was very rudimentary in those days. But here you can see, this is the frequencies, the highest frequencies at the top, and that's the degree of power. It's a fantastic machine. It's got all sorts of options and possibilities. It can measure the autonomic nervous system, etc., etc. So what we do control tests outside the circle. We then go into a circle and we repeat the tests. And this particular year, we were doing tremor. We were doing tap, tremor, and I can't read the other thing. Anyhow, these results were fantastic. Just want to see, particularly the tremor in the circle. Oops. In the circle, the control group is 2.7% less than in Avery, but the Parkinson and the central tremor sufferers were actually 18% lower. Now that is a huge amount, and even afterwards, that was maintained to a very large degree. We were 2.3%, and they were still 15% lower. Now, this research is frustrating, because we can only do it up to a point. I would like to know how long these results lasted. But Paul Gary, he's got his work to do it over next to hospital. I can't get all the guinea pigs together again. And also the energy in the crop circle changes. So as I said, this is an evolving fluid, very fluid phenomenon, and it can be quite frustrating at times. So this is the best we can do under limited circumstances. And it was Tina Martin, who's actually here now, who had the bright idea of why don't we just write a simple sentence before going in, when we're inside, and afterwards. And here's this, the cat sat on the mat, and you can see how terrifically Tina's writing improved when she was in the circle. It's beautifully formed and highly legible. She then extended it into a more detailed report, and we'll just go over this briefly. This was when she was actually inside the circle, and she can do spirals. Now, Parkinson's sufferers and the central tremor sufferers really can't do spirals. That's right, isn't it, Tina? It's impossible for them. And there she is, look at it, absolutely as clear as could be while she's inside the circle. And then we go on, we go on, we go on, and then eventually the next page, where this was 5 days afterwards, you can see it's completely deteriorated. As we're trying to do a straight line, which she didn't even attempt straight lines. And look at her spiral, it just doesn't really exist. So this is all very, very interesting, and each year we do different tests, all relating to neurological conditions, mainly Parkinson's and essential tremor. And this year we went to a different place. We went to Avery Sports and Social Club, and their facilities were excellent there. We'll certainly use them again. And there'd been a fantastic circle at Martinsell Hill. And this was quite remarkable. I just want to find, because this is really very, very important. Michael Glickman, who I think many of you may know, he is a mathematician and a geometer. And I got in touch with him because it is hugely complicated. And I said to him, can you tell me a little bit more about this? Well, he wrote saying that he'd been drawing up circles now for nearly 30 years. And I happen to know that it took him 2.5 days to actually draw this one up. And he said he was astonished by the skill and precision embodied in the Martinsell Hill. It is, in my view, he says, one of the top 10, maybe 5 formations we have received, but perhaps I'm prejudiced, he goes on to say. It contains 28 pentagrams and 140 precisely formed isosceles triangles, each with a prime angle of 36 degrees, which automatically generates the golden section. Any suggestion that this meticulous and majestic rock formation might be man-made is bizarre to the point of lunacy. I quite agree with him. And in fact, this was harvested out. The morning has arrived at 8:43. The farmer went in. There were only 3 people who got this picture, and they all had drones. And this picture is actually courtesy of Nick Ball, and it's going to be the front cover of my calendar too. He's allowed me to use it. It is remarkable, absolutely remarkable. So the farmer obviously didn't like crop circles. But when we did the tests, we'd done tests before at Stichcombe where we got those curious results, the tremor results. And just because something is harvested out, I believe it doesn't mean to say that the energy is not still present in the ground. It has to be. So I got in touch with the farmer and I explained the research we were doing, and he said, well, he was always interested in scientific research. So he said, I tell you what you do. When you finish doing your control tests, we'll meet you down at the bottom of the field and take it from there. How many people will there be, he said. So I said, maybe 10, and then I said, no, I think probably a few more because other people bring people. Well, it turned out we were almost 20. So anyhow, we did our tests. We did our tests, there it is, you see, harvested out. We did our tests, and the tests we were doing, or Gary was doing this year, was measuring the saccadic eye movements. Now, in Parkinson's sufferers, they're very jerky, as opposed to what he calls slow pursuit movements, which are, well, most of us, all of us, without Parkinson's, or central tremor sufferers do suffer a bit from it. We have very smooth eye movements. This is a Parkinson's sufferer's eye movement. So what he did, he would dangle a pendulum in front of the person's eyes, and then it's recorded in the computer program. And here we have Linda Daubney, she has essential tremor. The next one was Jill Puttick with Parkinson's. And here we have her eye movements, which, as you can see, are quite different. A whole lot of sort of spiky bits of the peaks. And here we have a control sample. This was Jane Goodchild. You can see again, much smoother. So then we went into, and there was Hazel Drummond doing her test. And again, we haven't actually gone over the test completely yet, but certainly we had some interesting results, mainly in the pituitary gland, which is one of the master glands. And here we were in the field. It was scorchingly hot, so we had to take in umbrellas because you couldn't actually see what was happening on the screen. It looks scary as though Paul is actually killing Jill. He wasn't. And there we are, we then do the second control test, which is done outside. So what we've got is 3 complete, absolutely identical tests. Control test in the circle, double control test outside. So 3 tests, and they can all then be analysed and compared. And this is what is absolutely fascinating. I don't know if you can see it clearly. This was the compare the before and after eye movements of a Parkinson's subject. I can't see it very clearly here, but you can see the difference. Can you see the difference in the after eye movements? Completely smooth as opposed to before. So again, something quite remarkable is happening in the field. So this is where our research is going. We try and improve it every year as new techniques come forward, as science improves. But again, it is limited because I would love to know how long that improvement lasted. Now, really one of the final stories I'm going to tell you is about people meditating or asking quite casually for a circle, a certain type of circle. And this has happened in many, many occasions. Jim knows that only too well. And there was a group of people, it was Glenn and Cameron Brough who were giving a talk one evening. And after the talk, somebody said, oh, why don't we try and get together and ask for a certain circle? So anyhow, several people left the room who weren't interested, but 25 remained, 16 men and 9 females. So they sat down and they almost, I think they actually drew out what they wanted, which was, sometimes people ask, most times they do actually draw out what they wanted. And within a couple of days, this one appeared at Hopbourne St Andrew. Now, if we count the number of circles on the outside, there are 12, the number of circles on the inside are 12, and we have a central circle. 12 and 12 make 24, and 1 make 25. That was the exact number of the people who were meditating. And he says here, we note that 9 males and 16 females equals 25 circles, equals 12 plus 12 plus 1. But also 3 to the power and 4 to the power of 2 equals 5 to the power of 2. And this was a circle also in which there were extraordinary results from the water bottles I used to vary. This was another area of research I'd done from early dawn of my investigation into crop circles. I used to use Volvic water because that was what Dr. Cyril Smith has asked me to use, because it was the most constant and it didn't go above 4 hertz. And I used to put in control samples outside and then berry samples inside. And when we were collecting by dowsing, I used to make notes, but also mainly by dowsing, control samples after collecting the ones inside, so that the control samples didn't go anywhere near the ones from inside. Well, the last lab which Jim found for me, eventually they wanted me to use half-pint bottles of water. Can you imagine digging a hole that big in some farmer's field? Well, that was the end of the research, I can tell you, because there's no chance I was going to ruin the farmer's field to that degree. They never knew I was ever burying something in, because I found over 99% of them, I can tell you. The only one where we didn't find bottles at all was inside the Julius set. Now, this was a severe disappointment to me, because I hadn't brought them with me, but a great friend called Mary Bennett, who had the awful problem in that 0707. So she said, Lucy, I'll bury them for you. So I said, well, listen, do make notes, because when you've buried them, you think you're going to know exactly where they are, but I promise you, you come back, people have been in the field, they've sat down there, you've buried them, and everything has changed. You won't find them. Oh, she said, yes, I know what I'm doing, said Mary. So anyhow, we agreed to meet the next time. And this was the time afterwards when I went in, and it was about a week older, or about 10 days older. And the energy had gone. I went in with fear and trepidation, having felt so ill walking up the tram line before. I was absolutely fine. What seems to happen is that the more people that go in, it's rather like blocking paper. In some circles it doesn't. Anyhow, Mary seemed to know all about it. So when I got in there, I said, listen, Mary, show me where they are. And so she said, one's over there. So we went there. We started digging and digging. No bottle. I know where they are, said Mary. If you just go away, she said, I'll find them. We never found a single bottle. That was the only time, and I was so disappointed because we could have had really fascinating results from that. Otherwise, we found just about, well, I say over 99% of them. But that research has come to an end. But I've done it for so many years, I've got such a huge repertoire of results. Also, I got a huge database. I got over 800 reports from people who have been in the vicinity of a crop circle, inside a crop circle, or even watching them on the screen. And I'm going to tell you what one person wrote to me, saying, it wasn't until your presentation on the 27th of July that I realized my past, my present, and my future. In other words, my purpose came into being. The first 3 crop circles that you showed in your sight and sound presentation, I threw a whole mass of circles. It's the most beautiful music, and everybody comes out smiling. It gives them such a release of emotions, I can't tell you. In your sight and sound presentation, it hit me so powerfully that I wasn't able to breathe. I had an intense feeling of emotion, feeling of love, release, knowing, meaning. But wasn't it wonderful? Her whole purpose came into being. And so I've got my questionnaires with me, and I'd love to hand them out to people, because as I say, I've got over 800, and I'm aiming for 1,000. So I'm also going to tell you other stories of people who have asked for circles. And this year, I was taking a group round, and there were 2 people up at the airfield where they were flying. I was taking them up to fly at the end of the day. And one, Josh Spillane, Josh Jury, said, Jenna, me and my friend Jenna visited Wilton Windmill the night before the creation of the Martin Cell Formation and asked for a request. We asked for there to be a crop circle with a sophisticated design, had a star element, and the design itself was to be encapsulated in a circle. We stayed until dusk. The next day, when I finished work, I noticed a crop circle was reported with the exact same requirements as we had asked for, and that was the Martin Cell Hill one. In brackets, she said, I was thinking of moving house. This design was really off the wall, as normally the designs are of stars or flowers. I said, if you make this for me, then I will believe in you. Lo and behold, a month later, and indeed it was a month later, because I know I was taking a tour on the 24th of July, and I was sitting in a formation, and I suddenly got a message. There's a formation, a very strange formation, up at Fovant. At all. Can you believe it? Of all the wacky things. Well, in fact, I think it's hugely symbolic. Because you can take that as being a door opening to new possibilities, giving you new directions in life, taking you up into other levels of consciousness, into other dimensions. I think it's just amazing. So there you are. Why not give it a whirl, I say. So we have to ask, is there an inherent consciousness between us and the crop circles? I believe there's an intelligence behind this, a consciousness, if you like, so my answer would be a resounding yes. We live in a universal consciousness, a multi-dimensional, multi-interactional consciousness, and when we take that on board, we also take on the awesome fact that we are all part of each other. So this is really a phenomenon which I think is like to teach us many things. In fact, one person who was looking actually I got a lovely book of just my photographs. All my books are now out of print. And she was looking at one of the photographs. And the word that came to mind for her was didactic. Well, she didn't know what didactic meant, so she looked it up. And the meaning she found was designed or intended to teach. Intended to convey instruction and information as well as pleasure and entertainment. And I think that fits the phenomenon pretty much down to a T. So here we have the cosmic consciousness, which I know Jim is going to be talking about. We have the great cosmic consciousness. And Jim and I are going to be doing workshops. We're going to have really great fun. And we are going to be looking at photographs and also things on the screen. And we want to know what you're going to find. So if we have a little time, we might have a little time for questions. Have we any time? Yes.
Does the clock always go down in the same direction?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. That's a very good question. Sometimes it goes down clockwise, sometimes anti-clockwise, and sometimes you can get it overlaid in an absolutely extraordinary way. There are many multi-faceted ways of the clock that can go down. Sometimes it's so complex, you simply can't begin to believe how that, well, it could not possibly be man-made.
And it's never jumbled.
Well, the man-made ones are jumbled, but sometimes they're almost crossing like this, and you can't work it out what came first. It can be quite extraordinary. Was another question? Yes?
Is there any commonality in the geology of the area where these clock circles appear?
Well, yes, there is. This again is a really good question, because there was some geophysical work done by somebody called Glenn Broughton and Steve somebody else. And what they found was that over 98% of all clock circles, and certainly all the genuine ones, are on chalk. And that was because you get the aquifers underneath, and this is an absolutely essential part of the formation of the circles. And I was in America one time, I've been there several times, and I asked one of the researchers there if they'd done any geophysical surveys. They said yes, that over again, about the same statistics, same percentages, was on limestone, and that again is a permeable. So ground system. So in fact, we have this essential. Well, it's an absolutely essential part of the whole formation of the phenomenon, yes.
How many other countries experience crop circles?
65 at the last count. And that includes Russia and far off places. I mean, really secret places, yes.
Is this a phenomenon that's been recorded in pre-industrial societies?
Is it, sorry?
Has this been recorded in pre-industrial societies, for instance, hundreds of years ago in South America in maize crops or in different crops in pre-scientific societies? Have they got records?
Well, we go back as far, John Aubrey. Now, John Aubrey, who was in the 1600s, and he was a classical, he looked into, but for John Aubrey and William Stooke, they did all the records of Stonehenge and Avebury as it was in the 1600s, and but for their valuable work, we wouldn't know what they looked like at the time. And it was John Aubrey who actually, he said he was fascinated by the grass circles on Salisbury Plain. And he actually wrote something about it. I don't know if I managed to have that anywhere. I always keep masses of information. But again, he got something which was so pertinent to later investigation. But that's going back to the 1600s. And indeed, you can look at many of the old cave drawings and other things, and certainly the New Grange curbstone, that's got carvings really almost identical to the crop circles we have. Yes?
Yeah. Does all these crop circles create good energy, please?
With energy?
Yeah. Do they create good energies?
Not always good energy, no, because you can feel awfully ill.
I'm not talking about man-made ones, I'm talking about the other ones.
The man-made ones,
Not the man-made.
not the man-made ones, no, you can feel ill in the genuine ones. Because the one at the Julius at Stonehenge, that couldn't be anything else but genuine, because the geometry in that is absolutely extraordinary, and we're going to be talking about that in our workshops. Awful lot of people felt extraordinarily ill to start within that one. I didn't go in, but the people who came out, there was a green, and then this other Canadians went in, and he felt as though he was irradiated, and you know, a lot was happening. Yes, so no, by no means for everybody feeling well. Yes.
So it was only in cultivated fields?
Well, no, we've had them in snow, we've had them in ice. Yeah, we've had them in snow in St. Petersburg, ice in Canada. We have them in Russia. A scientist, I think she was a physicist, she was on holiday, and she had a Dakar out in, way out towards even, I can't remember where it was a long way from Moscow. And she was walking in a forest one day, and she came to a glade, and there was this extraordinary circle in grass. It must have been in quite long grass, because otherwise it would rise up very quickly, even if it was just short grass. There wouldn't be any weight of the grass or the crop to keep it down. And she found an extraordinary thing. She said, and this again has been reported many times, that the temperature inside was totally different to the temperature outside. And she thought she was imagining things to start with. So she tried several times, and yes, each time, the inside it was quite different. Now that was in Russia. So it's a worldwide phenomenon. It's just whether one hears about the reports. And luckily a lot of people do write to me from, or from far away lands, and tell me these things, and it's really fascinating. And with the email I can then get back to them, and ask for further details. Yes?
Have you ever compared the biochemistry?
By everyone?
Biochemistry, the chemistry makeup of the wheat within the circle with the wheat outside?
Sorry, I can't actually hear. I think we need to have a microphone. Maybe one of those, do you think? Then everybody else can hear too. Everybody else can hear the question.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Switch it on.
Tell you what, let's
Okay.
use one.
No, you might as well. I'm just, the energy within the circle that affects the wheat within the circle.
Affects the what?
The wheat or the grass.
Wheat, yes.
The crop.
Yes.
Would it be interesting to compare the chemical makeup of that wheat within to the chemical makeup of the wheat outside?
Ah, good question. Did you get that?
Yes.
Good. Well, the only time that I've actually done any tests on that was an extraordinary one where, again, a bottle actually completely disappeared. I was retrieving a little bottle of water with Christopher Weeks, a control sample, and I thought he rather might like to dig the last one up. And we saw the top of it. I knew it was there. He started digging. It wasn't there. It had literally disappeared in front of our eyes. And there was no water. We looked to see if there was wet soil. There was no water either. So I thought Christopher was going to dig up the whole of the farmer's field. He was so agitated. That was just another story. But no, to get back to your question, we actually took seeds from inside that formation, and we took seeds as control samples from outside. We sent them up to a lab to be tested, and the seeds from inside had 40% higher protein content than the seeds outside. So maybe that should be a consolation to the farmers.
40% higher.
I think we probably, I don't know if that's working. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think maybe if anyone has any more questions, we do them in your workshops.
All right, we can certainly do that. So we're going to have, Jim and I are going to have huge fun in the workshop, so anybody who wants to come, I think maybe one is already full, but anyhow, here we are.
So I'd just like to say thank you very, very much to Lucy. That was